Hello, my name is Mark Bannon, and welcome to our panel for WonderCon, which is a virtual panel because WonderCon got canceled. So the panel's originally it was called Game of Thrones, You Pick the Ending. But of course, since we don't have an audience, we can't interact with the audience like that. So we've changed the format a little bit. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to talk about a new ending for Game of Thrones, and we're going to have Larry Niven judge it, since he hasn't read the books or seen the show. He's going to pick the ending he likes the best. And so let's begin, I guess. So here's all the panelists. Let's see, who'd like to go first? Let's start with Jimmy Diggs. You're next to me in the screen. I love that effect.
Welcome, gentlemen.
So Jimmy Diggs has sold more episodes to Star Trek than any other freelance writer in the history of the franchise, mostly Star Trek Voyager episodes and one Deep Space Nine episode. He's also famous for creating crypto historians, which is what people walk up to him at Comic-Con or at events. They ask him about crypto historians before they talk about the Star Trek stuff, which is kind of interesting. So this is Jimmy right here in the upper left. And then we have Marc Scott Zicree underneath me. And Marc, you've done like 200 hours of TV shows and screenwriter. And go ahead. You want to talk about?
Sure. Yeah, well, I've written for Next Gen, DS9, Babylon 5, Sliders, 100 Smurfs, He-Man, Super Friends, hundreds of hours of TV. Plus, I wrote the Twilight Zone Companion, wrote the best-selling Magic Time trilogy, and now I'm doing Space Command and 6 other series that I'm creating with various people. So it's fun. I have my own studio. It's cool.
Don't forget Guillermo del Toro's book, right?
Yes, I wrote Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities with Guillermo, and he may be in the new episode of Space Command that we're doing during the pandemic. So more on that shortly.
And Space Command is finished or getting finished?
We shot the first 3 hours. We're prepping for hour 4 of the 12-hour season, and we're doing a pandemic episode where all of our actors are shooting their own scenes in their own homes using their own cameras. And that's, Bill Mumy, Mira Furlan, Bob Picardo, Armin Shimmerman, Nichelle Nichols, on and on, Christina Moses. It's really fun, super fun.
Oh, great. Okay. And then let's see. Then we have Robert Meyer Burnett, who's producer and, Jimmy likes to say, respected voice amongst the fandom menace. And you've done several documentaries on Star Trek mostly, haven't you?
Yeah, no, I did for CBS. Roger Lay Jr. and I produced all of the Blu-ray documentaries that were on Star Trek The Next Generation and Enterprise. Wow. And then a horror film I produced, The Hills Run Red, is coming out next month from Scream Factory on Blu-ray, which I'm excited about. I just finished we did 6.5 hours of new special features, and I never thought this movie would get to Blu-ray, and I'm very excited that it did.
Great title.
the Hills Run Red. I want to do a sequel called The Rivers Run Black, and hopefully we'll be able to get that off the ground now.
Actually, they've had this disease, right? There's also been rivers all over the world running red, and plagues of locusts. It's a shock.
And the murder hornets that have arrived in North America.
Oh, yeah. I've seen that too.
Hornets.
So there's Robert Meyer Burnett. And then next is, let's go around, I'm doing clockwise. So David Brin, on your website, welcome to the world of science, technology, adventure, and imagination. That's a great introduction, I have to say, on your website. So best-selling, award-winning novels and books that explore our changing world. And you're a NASA advisor, astrophysicist, futurist, tech pundit, and forecaster, right? And so you're also a speaker, right?
Yeah, although I'm doing more of that for free these days. I'm not. The advantage is I don't have to get on airplanes. But in any event, the future is, as a neighbor of Marc Zicree said long ago, the future is fun. The future is fair. You may already have won. You may already be there.
Right.
Fireside theater.
Yes.
All the science. We're living in a giant science fiction novel right now.
Yes.
So then last but not least is Larry Niven, famous. Well, I like to call you one of the writer gods, or the gods of writing, science fiction at least. I've lost count of how many books you've done. How many have you done?
Done 70 to 80, something like that.
Wow, 70 or 80 books.
When
give or take 10.
intermixing.
Right. So this should be fun with all these writers here. Let's. A lot of people were not extremely happy with Game of Thrones. Most people, they liked it, but they didn't love it. And I don't like to. First thing I want to say about the whole Game of Thrones experience is I don't think we could. I don't want to get into criticizing the two writers who adapted it to TV because David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, I think they're brilliant writers, and I think they're some of the best writers in the world, in my opinion. And they did a pretty good job of adapting it to TV, and we wouldn't even have the TV show if it weren't for them. So a lot of people may be angry at them, but I think that may be a mistake. So the whole point of this panel is it's kind of in a sense of fun because a lot of people were frustrated with the ending. You know, if it was perfectly done, I think there would still be people frustrated with the ending because they wanted certain things to happen. So, and everyone seems to have their own idea of how they'd like this story to end. So we'll go through everyone and they can comment on how they think it should end. Maybe if one of you'd like to give a little quick recap of what the story's about so that we can, just for Larry's benefit. I don't know, anyone here like to do a quick
Mark
recap?
waved his hand.
Okay.
Here's my hand to talk about the subject, but God, to recap Game of Thrones, you can just say it's about various groups of royal families vying for the Iron Throne. One of them has a dragon, and things happen. Stuff collides. But the problem, I think, with the ending was that the showrunners, the writer-producers, were probably mentally and emotionally off onto their next job. And so they let go of the steering wheel. If you go on Mr. Sci-Fi on my YouTube channel, Elaine and I actually reblocked the entire final season, and it had the ending that we thought the show should have had, which is, I think, probably why I'm on this panel. But I feel very strongly because the actors were bummed out. They asked one of the actors before the series finale aired how he felt about the season, and he said disappointed. And I think that was very telling. I think, first of all, you always have to view your actors as your collaborators, and if they have a problem with what you're doing, there's a problem with the show. And I think that they basically gave power to subordinate characters where it didn't make any sense at all that they were the winners at the end or they were the king or any of this stuff. The people that the audience was not invested in emotionally were the ones who ended up with the power, and it was just loopy. And that came from, I think, the writer-producers being distanced emotionally from their own show by that point. That's my feeling about it.
You think they may have had a bit of exhaustion after 8 years of working on?
No, I don't think it was exhaustion because they had done such an amazing job of production and writing and guiding those characters through all of those seasons, even beyond where the novels had taken the characters. And so I think it was mainly that they just kind of thought, okay, we're out of here, and they just didn't do their jobs. I think it was creative incompetence more than anything. Not to badmouth them, but I think it's a huge wound to that franchise, I think, that it ended so badly because all of the Game of Thrones merchandise, all the Game of Thrones spin-offs, all of these things that were being in place, they squandered that because there's something about a story where if you end it badly, it really wrecks everything that's gone before. The audience feels betrayed, and it's very hard to get that trust back once they've felt that. So I having made TV for so many years, I really I can see the dangers of that. So many TV shows are badly steered, badly helmed, and I think that this show was so well run for so long, and it was such a terrible disappointment that they did such a bad job at the end. Really, really, really sad.
It's like
Can I respond to that?
Okay.
I think what Mark said is absolutely correct, but I mean, I don't think I've ever seen something or felt something that was more disappointing. And I wouldn't even say the entire season. I was with it with the first 3 episodes leading up to the long night, the battle with the White Walkers coming and descending upon Winterfell. And I thought that the final 3 episodes of the show not only betrayed everything that came before, and as Mark said, it ruined the whole series, I think. You know, I had pre-ordered the beautiful Blu-ray box set of the show, but knowing that it doesn't end satisfactorily, there's no reason for me to go back and watch any of it. I can enjoy various episodes and things, but one of the things that I think that the show is most guilty of is it set up these conflicts. The White Walkers were a presence in the show. For Larry to know, there is a faction of the undead. And this faction of the undead is on this relentless march down into the civilized sectors of the land of Westeros. And they have been kept out of that land by a giant ice wall that was built with magical forces 1,000 years or so before the show begins. And these White Walkers, they're almost like a plague of locusts or a naturally occurring catastrophe. They will wipe out every living being. And they are a presence from the very first episode all the way through 8 seasons, 8 years of the show. And they are shown as being one of the most formidable forces that could wipe out everyone. And yet they use tactics. They have a reason for doing what they're doing, or so we think. And they have been set up. There's supposed to be, at least I thought, a revelation that was going to be brought at the end of the show about what was happening with this faction, with this undead force, that there's a reason why it was doing what it was doing. And that ended up to not be the case. And I felt to myself, well, what was the point then? Like, you set up this force. There had to be an intellectual reason behind what they were doing. They had to have something that they wanted, something they wanted to accomplish that had remained a mystery, that hopefully would be revelatory to the end of this story, that would have informed all of the other stories that were surrounding what was going on. And ultimately it was what is that? Sound and fury signifying, unfortunately, nothing.
Yes. Yeah.
Might I suggest what happened to the show, according to what the feedback I got, George R. Martin was overrun. He went past him. He wasn't writing fast enough. He couldn't catch up with the ending, and somebody else had to take over.
Well, it was definitely a disappointment. And again, there's tying up story threads, as Robert's talking about, but there's also having an emotionally satisfying ending. And there's several that would have been possible that were emotionally satisfying. I mean, they have Daenerys, this character that people came to love, and some people named their babies after, unfortunately, who turns at the end and becomes a monstrous character. And whether or not they made that choice, there were satisfying endings that could have been arrived at. Either way. But they chose to basically say, okay, here's these characters that no one has cared about, like Bran, the three-eyed raven, who's not even connected to humanity anymore, has no emotional range. He's flattened affect man, and they make him the king. It was after 7 seasons of seeing who would end up a wise ruler theoretically, or not. But it was just moving the pieces around. I mean, again, when an audience becomes distanced from a show, it's often because they're no longer emotionally caring about the people whose adventure it is. I mean, our job as fiction writers is to make an audience care about people who don't exist. And so, and they can care about them whether they're heroes or anti-heroes, but if they don't care about the characters, then particularly in television, why are they taking the ride?
Well, Mark, you're a television producer, so do you think these guys, what I've heard, that producers in this phase of their career, what they normally do is pass off a television series to the next guy down the line so they can put into development their next television series. And this is the standard mode of operation for people's careers in Hollywood. And that these guys were actually, like you said, I think Robert Myers Burnett knows more about this part of it, that they were ready to start up Star Wars. Yeah, but the problem is that even the executives of HBO, should have kind of had their tuning forks to the thing. It's like when it's that badly plotted, when it's that badly executed, and the entire cast is saying, "What's the deal here?" That's where you go to the showrunners and you say, "Look, you guys got to come back and you got to make this work." And that's what they did with the pilot. The pilot they basically reshot, and that saved the show because it wasn't testing well. They should have done the exact same thing with the ending, because these are intellectual properties that are worth billions of dollars. And to squander that, even from a business standpoint, not even a creative standpoint, is
dreadful error in judgment. I mean, Star Trek and Star Wars both have proved very resilient, and they can stand waves of bad individual series or bad individual stories. But Game of Thrones, they only have one story. And the problem is that when you're structuring an entire series to be one big story, it's not like Spock's brain is a bad episode, but then we'll get City on the Edge of Forever or whatever. You know, it's like they gotta take their shot and stick it. They gotta stick the landing, and they didn't. You know, so.
You have any comments, Larry or David? In general.
Well, I'd rather wait till the end because I have a very impudent alternate ending. But Mark, the whole purpose of this panel is for you guys, the 3 or 4 of you who are devoted GOT fans. I admit that I only watched maybe 20 episodes across all the years. It happened to be that when I was off on speaking tours, the hotel room happened to have HBO on some of the most critical and important episodes. It's actually really incredible how that worked out. Yeah. I got to watch Red Wedding and I felt totally efficient in keeping up with these characters, and I know them pretty well with just 15 or 20 episodes.
Yeah,
I'm with you to talk about my alternate evening.
I want to hear first Mark and then Jimmy and then Robert. I want to hear what you would have done. Let's get to it.
Well, okay. Well, what you have to say?
Larry's got a question.
Okay, Larry.
Oh, reminiscent. I remember working on The Watcher in the Woods, a movie starring Betty Davis.
Yes, wow.
I remember what they did. We were told after we were shown the first hour and a half of the movie, minus the last 10 minutes. Then we were asked to describe what we thought the ending ought to be. And then we were shown the ending they had. What had happened was they took a children's book, The Watcher in the Woods, and they ran a movie on it, making changes wherever they felt like it, with no supervision except from Walt Disney's son-in-law, whose experience was as a football player.
Mm.
Yeah. They get to the end and their ending had disappeared.
Mm.
What they did looked like they had ripped it off the back end of a Japanese mechanical movie.
Mm. Yeah, well, there's a reason they call it stupidity. The reason I work in television rather than film is because television, the writers run the show. It's in film, that's not the case unless you're a writer-director. But in TV, for instance, with Space Command and with the wide majority of the shows I worked on previously, I write it, I direct it, I produce it, I cast it. Every decision, particularly with what I'm doing now, every decision is my decision. And so I have ultimate power in that regard. And so that's very satisfying as an artist. It's similar when you write a book, you have control over it, you know, and I wouldn't be working in this medium of TV if I didn't have that power, because what's the point? Money is not what drives me, but creative satisfaction is. But in terms of Game of Thrones, just in terms of my, unfortunately, I didn't have David's luxury of being in all the hotel rooms and seeing the top episodes. I actually had to watch all the episodes. And I actually read all the novels, and so I'm actually pretty steeped in this. I worked with George R.R. Martin on 2 shows, on the new Twilight Zone and Beauty and the Beast, and so I knew him even before Game of Thrones. And but as I say, if anyone wants to study how I would have finished the show, I did a Mr. Sci-Fi video, and it runs about a half hour. And you just go on to Mr. Sci-Fi on YouTube, and you type in Game of Thrones, and it'll come right up. And you know, so I will bow to the others for their interesting choices of how to end it, and then maybe I'll give a little thumbnail.
Oh, come on, Mark!
Yeah, could you summarize it?
I'll summarize. So I would have taken it through to where Daenerys does turn and goes evil. Now they've already established that Jon is a Targaryen. So the dragons don't attack him. They don't mess with him. And he actually is the rightful heir to the throne if you're following that Targaryen line of reasoning. So when he kills Daenerys, the dragon doesn't, it burns the Iron Throne, but it doesn't harm him. He then goes out and he faces down all of these other people, and he says, look, I'm going to be the king. The dragon's going to back me up. Everyone pledged fealty to me, and then I'll set everything straight. And so essentially, you know, he does, and he assigns. I'm trying to remember the imp's the character's name. You know, who played the imp. You know, it was the dwarf.
Tyrion.
Yeah, Tyrion Lannister.
Yes, he puts Tyrion in charge of ruling that kingdom, but he's sort of like the king of the north. He's over them all to kind of be the same person. But he puts that's right. He puts Tyrion and Sansa in charge because they had formed an alliance. They have wisdom, and they aren't going to drive things off the cliff. They don't have ambition the same way that other characters did. His basic goal would be to put people in power who don't have ambition, and who are emotionally stable. You know, and that was basically how I structured the ending, where it made sense, because the only one who had the power to actually hold power would have been Jon, because he had the dragon, and you know, the others, it was always going to be, you know, a very slippery slope. So that was how I summed it all up.
If I can make comment on that briefly, that could actually be what happened.
Yes.
I mean, there is nothing about what we saw in the ending that's inconsistent with the idea that Jon held that meeting and said, "I'm going off north for a little while. You can pretend I was banished." There's really you could overdub 5 minutes of what existing footage.
Yes.
And get what you wanted.
Ending, yeah. Well, also, you know, the other thing that didn't make sense in the ending, as shown, was the Unsullied take the Citadel, and then somehow they summon the heads of all these different kingdoms to kind of like have a trial or just decide who should rule. That's not what they would have done. They were incredibly furious that their queen, whom they loved and were devoted to, had been murdered. So that step in the story made no sense at all. It was totally the powers that be jamming the story the way they wanted it to go, rather than having it make any logical sense.
Nor does the almost infinite supply of Unsullied.
Yes. Well, yeah, you know.
I had my idea for an ending would be just leave everything the same, except have Daenerys win and kill Jon and kill everybody else and be an evil dictator and take over. That's an easy way, and it would sort of be consistent with the dark stuff going on in Game of Thrones. So that's one idea I come up with. How about
my ending is you know, I'm an avid war gamer, as Mark knows. And one thing that bothered me the most is all of a sudden, you know, the White Walker, he's this great strategist. He's calm, he's methodical, you know, he's glacial even. And then all of a sudden he just gets stupid and makes one of the biggest tactical mistakes you could ever make in warfare, and throws all of his forces at a fixed fortification. I mean, that was just mind-boggling stupid. Well, so the one thing that I would have done, of course, it would have taken another season to resolve if I did this. The one thing that I would have done is, as soon they're at the fortress, Winterfell, right?
Yeah.
Winterfell. So everybody's at Winterfell. They're expecting this enormous army to come down and sweep them away. You see them having their conversations. Oh, no, it's been nice knowing you, and I'm glad that we got to meet, and blah, 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 blah. And here comes this great big tsunami of dead people. And just when they get to the Winterfell, they part like the Red Sea and march right past it and don't do a damn thing to the fortress. They go right past it, and everybody's sitting there going, what the just happened? What are we going to? And then realization hits, and they go, holy, they're going for King's Landing. And they're gobbling up all the people on the way, getting more, just bigger and bigger, and gobbling up more and more. Now they've got a race to get to King's Landing, because once they get 1 million more zombie guys, game over. They've got the world. So they have this incredible rush to get there. They have to fight their way through the White Walkers to get to King's Landing first. They get there, and it's just about too late. And Daenerys gets on her dragon. And the one thing that I was always taught by my mentors, and one of those is Larry right there, is that you have to make the central character dance on the head of a pin. You have to make them suffer. You have to make them have to take the one thing that they love the most and yank it away from them and break their heart. So the one thing that Daenerys thought she was a savior. She thought she was going to end the cruelty of the world and bring enlightenment with her dragons, right? Mm. But then she realizes at the last minute that the only way she can save the world is to destroy King's Landing. She cannot they try everything to stop it. They try, every plan they have fails, and it fails, and there's getting to be only one plan left. She's got to get on that dragon and burn everybody down. She doesn't want it. She does it crying with tears in her eyes. She sees the people dying, and it tears her up. And she just, at the end of it, she has a total mental meltdown. She's gone. She's mentally gone. And so that's when Jon has to step in, consoling, loving, takes her in his arms. And he's going to be the king one day. But for right now, he's got to take care of his woman and his upcoming child. They both fly away on the dragon to come back later, right? Maybe. That's a good way for a sequel. And, like he said, he leaves the right people in charge. They have a tetrarchy, 3 of the best minds all working together to take care of the kingdom until one day. And of course, they'll never come back as they are now, but they'll come back with their son, who is fully grown, on his own dragon, later on, and then starts the next bunch of series. So that's how I would do it. March right past Winterfell, and she's got to actually burn down the city, but it destroys her.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, who's next?
David?
Robert or David?
Yeah.
Robert.
Well, see, because the show is called Game of Thrones, and ultimately you have Daenerys, who is the liberator, and then you have Cersei Lannister, who is now, through her machinations, destroying the High Sparrow. She's positioned herself to rule. She's obviously a horrible, terrible tyrant, but she was completely dispensed with in the final season. I mean, she has been a prime mover during this whole time, and she has come back from being horribly humiliated in the streets of King's Landing to be this great ruler. They do nothing with her at all in the 8th season. As a matter of fact, nothing that she has done, this great character that Lena Headey was playing, is completely wasted. And you're waiting, I was at least waiting for some kind of a showdown between Daenerys and Cersei Lannister. Well, like Jimmy, I would have had what the White Walkers were is we've been watching people for 8 seasons playing this Game of Thrones, positioning themselves, trying to get this, trying to get that. And what you find out really is the White Walkers, the undead scourge of this civilization, is actually a crucible. That all of these characters that have been playing this game, none of it matters. And that what is descending upon them is a crucible that is going to find out ultimately who is worthy and who is not. And the fact is that all of these political machinations have everyone's eye is off the prize. Everyone's going for King's Landing. Well, what they should have been thinking about is, what is the future of humanity? Do we choose life, or do we choose death? This is a land that is full of death and dying. Life is cheap. All of these, everybody who's out for themselves, and what the crucible of the living dead is supposed to do is ultimately ban all of these people together under a common cause, which is to literally preserve life itself. And you would have, if the way I had done it, is that somehow, and I don't know how this would work out, is that everybody has to find common ground. Daenerys and Cersei, they would have to meet. Like literally, we saw them, one of them some on a battlement and one's on the ground, but they would literally have to come together and figure out a way to muster all their forces, because they think what's happening is the battle to end all battles is happening. So, and they're still playing the game. Daenerys is positioning herself, Cersei's doing her thing, and Jon has to figure out, oh my God, what am I going to do? And Jaime Lannister, another character that we're waiting for his comeuppance, what's happening, completely wasted. So all of the characters that we've been waiting to see what's going to happen, the Game of Thrones is now a tightly woven, everybody's in a much smaller area, and it's all going to be this melee free-for-all. all of the machinations. And again, I don't know what the details of all this would be, but everybody would have been drawn together at King's Landing, all of the various armies, all of the various factions. Like Jimmy said, the White Walkers would have gone around Winterfell. As a matter of fact, we would have found out they were not going to come to Winterfell early on, so everybody could leave Winterfell to know that they're going to King's Landing, and they're hoping, can't we do so? The last 2 episodes before the final episode would have been all of our final machinations, and I don't know what's going on, and then a la Return of the King, Mordor and Gondor, you know, we have the battle to end all battles. And it could have been this monstrously huge, and as a human being falls, a White Walker is born. And the battle, it's getting worse and worse and worse until the point where the battle is lost. Dragons, everybody, the dragons are dead. Drogon is dead. There are no dragons left. And literally to the point where the city is now, we're all in the Red Keep. Everybody is in the Red Keep. All of our characters are there where the Iron Throne is. And all of the series has led up to the fact that these idiots have been fighting over this throne, and they're literally in the same room. There is no way to fight. All is lost. The apocalypse has come. Judgment Day is here. And then you would do something unexpected where, I don't know who, but whoever was worthy, the Night King, the leader of the undead, would come, and there would be some kind of a choice made by somebody. I don't know, like at the end of Last Crusade with drinking from the right grail, or something would happen where all these characters that are literally standing in front of the Iron Throne have to then step up, and whether it's the riddle of the Sphinx or whatever, and the one person that's worthy is, in fact, I would have made it Jon Snow. And they're all eliminated. They're all eliminated by the Night King, and when the transfer of power is actually made, the one person, then the entire army of the dead evaporates, disappears. And almost everyone there's very few human beings left alive anywhere in Westeros. I mean, if you weren't there, you know, you could go to Marine and these other cities that aren't around, that you had to travel over the sea. They're okay. But almost every human being is gone. They've all been swept away. And the person who won the Game of Thrones is standing in an empty citadel, the only person literally left alive, and that person sits down on the throne, and the episode ends. The show ends.
Okay.
Interesting.
Okay.
That's like the only person left alive on, was it the island? I can't even remember the name of the series.
Lost.
Well, yeah.
Like the only person left alive at Lost is the dog on the beach.
Yeah. Well, when you were talking about the White Walkers, you know, going past Winterfell and not doing anything to it, I thought it'd be funny if they went past King's Landing, didn't do anything to that, and they're just heading down to Florida to retire because it's warm.
Hey, Mark.
That's how the coronavirus started. Yeah, I get it.
I've got a question, Mark. How do you think George Clinton Johnson would have ended Game of Thrones?
Ooh.
With everyone smoking. George. It's interesting because he was one of the great miniaturists. You know, I mean, those Twilight Zone episodes he wrote, Nothing in the Dark, Kick the Can, those are just gorgeous, like fine pocket watches or something. They're astonishing. I think George, you could equally say Howard Serling or any of the great writers of fantasy, Ray Bradbury, any of them. But again, this is George R.R. Martin's universe, and of course in television, when we adapt novels, we're interpreting those novels. And so ultimately it's, you give the keys to the people who are in charge, and that's why people have been so unhappy, and many of them with Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Picard, because they feel the keys to the car, been given to the wrong people. But it's so I have no idea how any of our great writers from the genre would have taken this material.
It's almost like there were two different opposing problems with Game of Thrones and with Star Trek and Star Wars.
Yes.
You have the left brain people in Star Wars and Star Trek getting involved in things they shouldn't have gotten involved in. They should have stayed in the ivory tower and, taken care of the deals, because after all, those papers ain't going to push themselves. When you have everybody else in Game of Thrones, they were too hands off. The people, they should have grabbed the reins a little bit more, and I hate to say, about writers from time, but, rein them in a bit more.
Well, yeah, and but we'll see what the future brings, because again, are they going to pursue those spin-off series of Game of Thrones? I'm not sure what the future is going to be. We'll find out. But I want to hear David Brin's.
Yes, me too.
Well, yeah, I have to tell you that, and as I told George, and I've known him for many, many years, I thought that he was heading in a particular direction that I thought Frank Herbert was heading in Dune. And that is trying to pound modern people with the idea that I share with these guys, that feudalism sucks in all forms, at all ways, and that pyramidal social structures don't work, as they have not worked, dominating 99% of all societies that had agriculture. And Frank Herbert said, I kept at it and at it and at it, and they kept saying, "Oh, I'd love to live in that world." And so I made the next book, I made it even more horrible and even more horrible. And it didn't work. Anybody who would want to live in the world of Lord of the Rings is assuming that they would be Galadriel. Anybody else in that world, and you are in serious trouble. So let me first say one thing, and that is that I love the Tron shirt that Robert's wearing.
Yes, so
I would have changed. That's one of the movies that I loved that I would have changed. Just one line of dialogue and 1 minute of visual. And that is when he wakes up amid the wreckage of those recognizer parts. And instead of saying, "Here, let me do some magical maker power, user power," and does this, and the parts all come back together, instead pick up one of the blocks of pieces of the recognizer and says, "Wait a minute, I wrote this. This fits with this, and this fits with this." And using that left brain rebuilds the startup command of the recognizer, and then it goes like this. 1 minute of change, morally very different.
right.
And there are so many examples of this. Return of the Jedi visually could have been almost as good a movie as the Great One, as The Empire Strikes Back. If just we could overdub that scene between the Emperor and Luke, instead of it right now being horribly, horribly morally evil, every single thing that scene tries to say. Instead, have it be about the real difficulties of being a champion of the people. But you see, that was part and parcel of what went on all through the 80s and 90s, and that was third movie syndrome, which struck the Game of Thrones. And that is that all through that era, the third movie in a science fiction series, except for Poltergeist, where it happened in the second, utterly betrayed absolutely every decent thing that we loved about the second one. And I include Star Trek III, which just filled me with rage. I mean, this character who had done us so much good across his entire life and career, he doesn't get to have the solace of having a son. And the lesson of The Wrath of Khan that made us feel so good was Faustian at the end. And it said, if we're good, like in Star Trek, we get to pick up the creator's tools and make beautiful things. And you felt great. And Star Trek 3 was a line by line checklist for the Frankenstein syndrome. Man should not pick up God's powers and all of that. It was exact betrayal, as was, Aliens 3 and all of that. So that brings us to Game of Thrones. Alas, my proposal for Game of Thrones would have been for George to intervene some like fourth or fifth season and start lacing through, because it wouldn't have worked as just the last couple episodes. And just make it more explicit and more clear that every single lord and lady ought to die. The good ones should die mercifully, offered a cup, the way it happened with what's her name. They're all horrible, except maybe Jon Snow. And here's the deal. He should be invited back to King's Landing from the Wall once a year to open Parliament. And if he really behaves himself, maybe some son of his will be given the same privilege. What I would do is have the last one standing be the Brothers Without Banners. And that was laced in earlier, and they did nothing with it.
Yes.
We are trying to maintain a decent, wonderful, scientific, and advanced civilization, the first in which everybody gets to enjoy pleasures like Game of Thrones, wallowing in fantasies. And how I wish I had magic powers and super villains and super heroes. That's a bunch of ungrateful. But we have a civilization that's made it so we can all wallow in ungrateful and have fun. And Marc Zicree gets to have the life that he's had. And Robert and Jimmy and Larry and me. All I'm asking for is the slightest bit of gratitude to recognize that the context that we're in that lets us have Game of Thrones is the game of Thomas Paine. It's the game of democracy. It's the game of science. It's the game of lords and kings and feudalism. And right now, while oligarchy is making its big attempt to take over all of Western civilization, do you know why they're doing it all right now? Putin and Rupert Murdoch and the Chinese and everybody. You know why they're choosing right now all the mafia clans and all the gambling moguls? You know why they're doing it right now together? Because they know their time is almost up. 20 years from now, the world will be so filled with Hollywood images and Hollywood themes that it'll be too late for oligarchy. And what themes does Hollywood preach? Suspicion of authority, diversity, tolerance, and personal eccentricity and individualism. 20 years from now, it'll be too late, and that's why they're attacking us now. And unfortunately, the ending of Game of Thrones did not help one bit.
Wow.
A little bit of a rant there.
No, beautiful.
Absolutely. I loved it.
Brotherhood, Brothers Without Banners.
Wow.
Now I know Larry hasn't seen a lot of Game of Thrones, so David, I'm going to direct this toward you. Little sci-fi element to Game of Thrones. My personal belief, the reason why the winter was so bizarre and unpredictable, and why they actually had that opening sequence, is because Game of Thrones took place in a Dyson sphere.
And in a simulation.
Yes.
I sometimes think that that's what we're in. A syphilitic 90-year-old George W. Bush dropped quarters in 15 years ago and got all of his dream jobs, baseball owner, oil man. He got tired before astronaut, and he had put in so many quarters that somebody worse took over. All right, look, here's my other idea. Daenerys, her whole reason for being is not to rule Westeros, it's to be the revolutionary who doesn't stop. She should take her army, and she should have set Jon Snow on the throne, and should have said, "I get antsy. I've tried this in Meereen. I tried this in Esteros. I don't rule. I crush." So I hear there's this place called Even More Westeros. You set me up with a fleet. You set me up. Take all the Iron Guy's fleet. Set me up with replenish my army, and wave me bye-bye. I'm going to do what I do. I'm going to do me. And that's an alternative ending that I think could have been slapped onto this series.
I would have loved that.
Yeah,
I think that would have been, and like you find out, because the world seemed very small actually in Westeros, and you find out that there's, like in the Grey Havens at the end of the Lord of the Rings, there's a land we suddenly, like, no one ever considered there's a different land.
There's slave owners everywhere, and I'm going to go and screw them up. And I love what you just said, because it's time for those Ellen Deal, whatever it is across the West, to start getting some back. The Númenóreans tried, they failed, but they didn't have dragons.
And you could have had a scene where Sam Tarly, you know, he's read about this when he was studying in the great, where the great books of Westeros were, that he found out that there is this other world, you know, that in this forgotten book no one had paid any attention to, and that there's this other land. And it could have been him that brought this to the attention of someone, and that was...
Isn't it supposed to be east of Easteros?
Something like that.
All right, fine.
Yeah. like a giant Chinese continent.
I'm fine with that. Let me just say also that if you like my crackpot theories about Star Wars, I have a book called Star Wars on Trial, and essays online people can look up, and Mark will have some links for each of us underneath.
That's great.
And also, if you the Tolkien thing, I'm much more respectful toward Tolkien. So I have, if you look up my name in Tolkien, you'll find stuff on that.
And one thing I want about
talking about that, about the links, I only got one from Mark, and you can actually Google. Do you just go to YouTube and type in Space Command for Mark, right?
Or Mr. Sci-Fi. Mr. Sci-Fi on YouTube will find everything I'm up to. But the thing I want to say about David's latest take on Game of Thrones, you know, early on, Daenerys said, I don't want to, you know, be part of the wheel. I want to break the wheel. And so if we were going to make her some kind of Thomas Paine revolutionary spirit, you know, going around to that ancient world, that's a very fun idea. And I'm the only one probably of all of us who have written actually about the Revolutionary War. I don't know if you guys have, but Elaine and I wrote episodes of a show called Liberty's Kids that PBS did about the Revolution, and we wrote the 2 Thomas Paine episodes.
Yay!
Yeah, and so
I love those.
Yeah, it was great fun. We got nominated for the Humanitas Prize for those. It's the only script I ever wrote where I had to footnote every single line of the script to prove that it was historically accurate. And great fun, great fun. But again, the revolutionary spirit. I think what you were saying about, you know, I think it's very important that fans recognize the difference between reality and fantasy. And I agree with you that going back to a feudal society, it's like all the people who go into past lives and they're always Cleopatra. They're never the guy shoveling the on the street, you know. And so it's the same thing. If you really look back at times, I mean, we take things, and now that we're all locked up because of the pandemic, you realize what miracles we live with. You turn the water on and it comes out of the tap. You turn on the air conditioner. You turn on the range. We're communicating via the internet. I mean, these are miracles that only within the last few decades any of us could have had access to. Whereas if you were like some peasant or some serf back in previous centuries, you'd have a rough time of it in many ways, particularly in terms of disease. I mean, the fact that we've only had one of these worldwide pandemics in our lifetime is a testament to a lot that we've been able to accomplish. So, so I thought your discussion about feudalism and so forth was very, very interesting.
I think that actually we've sort of iterated toward a proposal, and that is that Daenerys break this wheel, and she demand the Brothers Without Borders be empowered, with Snow tentatively sort of trusted, and maybe a little bit of advice from Bran if he'll run a university, and then she gets the out of Dodge because it's what she does.
Yeah.
I'm going to give birth to this kid. You take care of her.
Cool.
Here's a question: what does Larry think about all this now? About all of our ideas? What do you think?
guys. I've toyed with the notion of letting one of the leader of the White Walkers in by sitting on the Iron Throne. So I like Jimmy Biggs's approach a lot, and I was able to follow some of the other approaches, which all sounded like you know what you're talking about. Even so, my move would have been to take a break, wait for George R.R. Martin to catch up, and let
There you go.
Yeah.
Mark, did you consider getting George R. Martin into this discussion?
No, I didn't. I never even thought about it. I could have asked probably Mark or David's got his contact info. That would be very interesting. But
actually, you suggested to me that it would be nice to get George R. Martin. You said, hey, do you think Larry Niven knows him? And I said, nah, I'm sure they don't. Yeah. That was probably a stupid thing for me to say.
Well, yeah, but it'd be very interesting. Isn't he working on his last book, and so he doesn't want to do any spoilers, so he can't really talk about it, right?
Okay, if it doesn't work, okay, but an attempt would have been interesting.
Yes.
Oh, well, maybe that'll be the premise for 2.0 of this thing.
Yeah.
Well, we could do another one for Comic-Con probably, because didn't they cancel Comic-Con? So maybe we can bring George in. But I mean, if he's working on his new book and he doesn't want to talk about, reveal anything, so
what the heck? Let's ask.
Yeah,
well, besides which, the Comic-Con guys could say, hey, look, help us launch this virtual thing. George is a very generous guy.
Yeah.
So if it's to help fandom and to help Comic-Con, then he might be willing to do it. If it's just another fan pestering about endings.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right. You know what, gentlemen? I think we've just laid the groundwork for our next episode. Featuring Mr. Martin.
I've got to ask, since you guys are here, and since David and Larry and Mark, you guys are all here, listening to what you were saying, David, about the future, I'm curious, Larry, I joined the science fiction book club when I was in the 4th grade, so I was 10 years old. And one of the first books I got was Ringworld. And I've been reading your work since I was 10. And I say that not to date anyone, but your work over the years, and you too, David, and actually Mark as well, because the Twilight Zone Companion I read a million times as I watched the show. But David and Larry, because I've read your work for so long, are you optimistic about mankind's future? And do you see that the 21st century, David, what you were talking about where we're going to be at in 20 years, was very optimistic? And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of tumult, and we're going to go through a lot by the time we get there. But Larry, are we ever going to have a Ringworld someday?
I am optimistic. It's done me a lot of good. I think we've got a wild future out there. But as for the Ringworld, my bet I'd put more money on the smoke ring.
Oh, I loved that one. Yeah. The integral trees.
Yeah.
Yes. One of my favorites of all time.
Well, my concerns, while my fiction can explore all sorts of ranges, my immediate concerns are just to deal with what I consider to be one of the top 5 explanations for the Fermi paradox. And that is feudalism. It happened so often on Earth for such very powerful Darwinian reasons. If you get a few dozen really tough males and they pick up metal or even stone implements, they can take other men's women and wheat. And they've done it again and again and again, and we're all descended from the harems of those guys, which is why males have such weird fantasies. We all think that we deserve harems. And
you have no idea.
The point is, in order to overcome that attractor state, that failure mode, we developed a very, very rare alternate attractor called Periclean democracy. And every time it's happened, vast productivity, vast creativity, vast expansions of freedom, and vast instability because individuals think they are actually important. And that allowed the oligarchs to crush Periclean Athens and Machiavelli's Florence, and they're trying right now. And I am concerned that if they succeed this time, they will use George Orwell's techniques, and we will simply join the tens of thousands, the millions of other civilizations who got trapped in this tar pit of feudalism. So am I an optimist? Am I a pessimist? Well, the odds have always been against us. And yet, I'd say the odds are probably more in our favor than they've been for any other race in the galaxy. And what that does is it puts a terrible onus on us. It means we don't have to succeed just for our children or for our nation or for our world or for our species. We might be the ones who go forth and save everybody else. In which case we'll be looked upon as the ancient ones, the wise ones, the ones who came, the deliverers, which is the premise of my comedy novel, The Ancient Ones. Plug.
I wish it was the premise of the 3rd season of Star Trek Discovery.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Well, you guys want to plug any of your things, any of your projects?
Yeah. Subscribe to Mr. Sci-Fi. You can watch the new episodes of Space Command. I'm currently creating 6 new shows under the title The Showrunners Network with, the creators of Farscape and The Expanse and so on and so forth. It's going to be an amazing thing. We're going to do a table read of our first pilot, Sweet Haven, with the cast very shortly on Zoom so people can watch it. And I'm writing a new book called Greenlighting Yourself, which is how people can do exactly what I've been doing. And it's great fun, great fun.
Great. So, okay. How about the rest of you?
Jimmy.
Well, actually, guys, I've been having a lot of success pitching this new television series. The coronavirus thing kind of put things on the skids for a minute. But the success I've had has been pretty doggone incredible. And I don't want to go into too much about what it's about, but most of the guys here are probably going to love the premise. It is historical. It's about something that actually happened. And the name of the series is Kemet. So when you guys hear Kemet, it's gone into production. Huh?
How do you spell that 4-letter word?
Kemet.
There you go.
Anybody recognize it?
Sure.
I've smoked some of that from time to time.
There might be something named that, yeah. But actually it has a lot to do with a kingdom called Kush.
Yeah.
I don't want to go into any more, but I've got I'm actually quite stunned at the success I'm having with this, but that's the whole reason I came here to LA was to get this off the ground. I think Mark's heard a little bit of something about this project.
Yeah.
But and I'm this is really amazing in Hollywood, but I'm overcoming every single obstacle I come against.
Great.
Every single one.
Yeah. Good luck.
Thank you, Dave.
You've got a great phrase, Jimmy. It's called I'm falling up. So when something
that's what whenever I have a collapse of some kind or what looks like misfortune, I always end up coming out of it on top better than I was before I had the misfortune. So Mark always says I have the habit of falling up.
Right. So how about what's everyone else working on?
A couple of books coming out about now. Coming out in April is Jerry Pournelle's last novel, which is a triple collaboration. Jerry and I and Stephen Barnes wrote a third in the Legacy of Hero series. It's called Starborn and Godsons.
Great.
It wraps it up. It has to wrap it up. Jerry died just before we finished the ending.
Great.
Wow, that sounds fun.
Well, I miss Jerry. He was awesome.
Yeah. I'll just mention, as I did before, I have a I'll send you some links. I have a new comedy album, new comedy novel called The Ancient Ones, and you have to get it from me via my website, davidbrin.com, and either it will make you guffaw and say har har and want to kill me, or it will make you groan and say I hate you and want to kill me. So either way, it's comedy is hard. The Ancient Ones.
Sounds good. So how about Robert?
Well, I just finished producing and editing a feature film that we haven't shown to distributors, but it's called Tango Shalom. And I've worked on it for a while. It's about a Hasidic rabbi who believes he's heard the word of God, and God has told him to learn to dance the tango. Being that he's a Hasidic rabbi, he can't touch another woman other than his wife, so he's got a problem. And it is a comedy, and it goes from there. And then also the film I produced, The Hills Run Red, Scream Factory, is finally putting out the Blu-ray next month. And we just did a bunch of special features for it. And then on a daily basis, I have my own YouTube show, Robservations, and I pontificate about entertainment subjects. But I've started to do some interviews, and I just dropped a 90-minute interview with Hannibal creator and Star Trek Discovery creator Brian Fuller. I did an hour-long interview with Melinda Snodgrass and Carrie David, whose documentary Breaking Their Silence is out. And I just finished Barbara Crampton, the star of Reanimator. And I just finished, I did a 2-hour interview with David Goodman, who's the executive producer of The Orville, and he's also president of the Writers Guild of America. So I just did that interview, and I'm going to drop that next week along with a 2-hour interview with comic artist Bill Sienkiewicz.
That's great.
Awesome.
Oh, can I mention something good that kind of happened to Larry? And Robert Myers Burnett's probably very much aware of this. You guys who are Star Trek fans and may remember the Kzinti that were introduced in the animated series, they are now considered Star Trek canon because it was mentioned in an episode of Star Trek Picard. Larry Niven's sentient felinoids, the Kzinti, are now Star Trek canon, mentioned in the series Picard.
Yeah, you called me up and you're all excited about that, and you're like, oh, blah, 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 blah. Oh, God.
The real question I have for Larry, though, is where's his check? Now that the now that known space is part of the Star Trek universe, I want to see a little cheddar going Mr. Niven's way.
I'm not prepared to spend that money.
He needs a shipment of latinum for that.
Weapon was a work for hire. All of the comic strips, all of the cartoon Star Treks were.
Yeah.
But it was brilliant anyway.
No money.
I love Slaver Weapon.
Wasn't it great?
It's great.
Awesome. It's great in all of its manifestations. It's great as a part of the known space universe.
Yeah.
It's great as a part of Star Trek. And you got to remember, Gene Roddenberry himself thought that the Kzinti had a place in his universe, that they fit perfectly and seamlessly.
Yep.
Great.
Yeah, they would.
All right, guys. Well, I must take my leave of your senses.
Yeah, thanks for participating. It's been awesome. It's been fun to listen to you guys talk about all this. You guys want to hang on later, keep talking. I'll end the recording. But thanks very much for showing up.
Thanks,
What an honor this has been.
Thanks for showing up, Earthlings.
Yeah, we'll do more. And it'll be fun.
Anytime. Thanks. Great having the time with you guys. Talk soon.
It was great seeing all you guys again. I love you guys.
Absolutely, Jimmy.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Shame. 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 Shame.